Twitter tipping is back. Twitter is allowing profiles to have Bitcoin addresses. They're talking about the Lightning Network, and it looks like they're bringing back change tip all over the place. This must be especially painful for people who worked at change tip or invested. I know change tip had meetings with Twitter back in the day. I think they got all the way up to Jack. I imagine they told Jack that Twitter tipping was the thing and they had the solution. They had lots of users using it. They had lots of spam that was going around. But the problem is they had that good old centralized database running the whole thing. It was never a good idea. Now Twitter has the Lightning Network. They might even have the option not to hold people's twits or their tips, tips for tweets, not to hold their tips. And it might work this time. Dan, Eve, your thoughts on Twitter tips back again?
Well, yeah, there was obviously change tip, or like, was it change tip? Sorry, yeah, back in the day, there was also like what was it like? People rumors in 2017 that like Redcoin was going to be the one for Reddit, and so tipping has kind of been in the in the sphere for a while, right? And it's a shame that obviously changed. It was a centralized service. Now there's Lightning, which is the decentralized version, obviously, of, or decentralized layer of Bitcoin. And obviously the transaction fees are so cheap. It's a lot more feasible to roll out, especially if it's Twitter themselves rolling out as infrastructure. Obviously, Jack's heavily endorsing Bitcoin in general, but also putting a lot of money into Bitcoin development. Yeah, I think it's a positive thing. Obviously, it sadly relies on the fact that Twitter is a centralized service, right? So, but then again, we've heard rumors, and I think Jack even said himself that he wants Twitter to be decentralized eventually. So I wonder what that would mean for censorship. Actually, what would will they decentralize the censorship that goes on? Will you have these kind of elected Snopes officials that will censor things or something like that, and fact checker? I don't know how that will evolve, but certainly it's good for the ecosystem being able to tip someone who makes a good comment or provides information. Yeah, I see it as a positive thing.
Now, we got in a lot of trouble back in the day for being critical of change tip. So I want to go ahead and address this right up front. I think it's a big deal that ChangeTip was just making their own centralized database. They were recreating what Bitcoin already does so well. They had the ability to access everyone's accounts. They had the ability to steal everyone's money. These are not acceptable trade-offs in the time. They could have used a more Bitcoin-based system, but obviously, as we saw the fees take off a few years later, that would have destroyed their company. Now, Lightning Network wasn't really available at the time. It wasn't even an idea yet. It was still, gestating. But now that we have Lightning Network, it looks like Twitter can take those key parts of ChangeTip that we disagreed with: centralized control, ability to control everyone's tips, abilities to steal everyone's tips, all of that, and they can put it into the Lightning Network where they wouldn't have so much control. So technically, it's a better time for it. The other thing we complained about with ChangeTip was all the spam. You'd get a message about how you got a tip. You'd get a message about claiming your tip. You'd get another message. You could send all these messages for 10 cents. It was the greatest spam tool imaginable. You could probably even send them for a penny. You could send like 5 messages to someone for a penny. People weren't looking at the spam aspects. And while Twitter did turn on some kind of a tip jar a few months ago, I don't think I've gotten a single tip. So there is something to be said about that spam. It does kind of generate the visual, the eyeballs. I don't know, Twitter might be able to fold it into the product better because they have control of the buttons and the interface. Maybe they can make it less spammy. Generally, I think this is good, but I also want to remind people of the story from the time that really helps you understand this. There was a Reddit where lawyers, very well-off people, get paid hundreds of dollars an hour, have a specialized knowledge that they've built up over time. Lawyers were volunteering and giving out free legal advice. And then someone from ChangeTip went in there and tipped them $5. It's not about the $5. The lawyers have lots of money. It's about actually giving back as a good thing. Not everything has to be monetized. Like trying to put a $5 on that interaction cheapens it because the lawyer doesn't need the money, wasn't asking for it or looking for it, and $5 is far too low. It should be hundreds, and that's why it's not being asked for. So we have to worry about changing all of our human interactions to, oh, you liked my tweet, I should give you a penny. Like, you can like my tweets because they're good. You know, you can retweet them because you want to share them, not because you're going to get a penny or a nickel or whatever it is. So we have to watch for that commoditization of all human experience, which they were very much into, and a lot of other marketing people. That's a good dollar right there, as Bill Hicks would say. Joshua Shigala, your thoughts on the return of ChangeTip, as it seems?
Yeah. I remember one of the most offensive sort of things would be, you know, someone would write a big article or something would happen on Reddit, and then a change tip would come in for like, you know, 1/4 of a cent. And if you're a hardcore Bitcoiner, you're like, yeah, stacking sats, cool. Because I know in like 10 years time, like right now, that would probably be worth $500 or something. So be happy. But at the time, for normal people, they're like, what the hell? It's kind of like, I remember typing and saying, hey, God, dude, can you at least tip the guy like $1? Like, throwing less than a cent is like going up to a busker who's playing really good music and going, oh, and throwing 1 cent into the bushes next to him and going, there you go, and walking up. Like, it's offensive almost. Like, it becomes the opposite of thankful. It's kind of weird, but yeah, we didn't have the Lightning Network. What I am a little bit concerned about is sort of centralization of massive nodes that everyone sort of plugs into Twitter's nodes, and then data correlation through Twitter across those nodes. Of course, the good thing is the eyeballs, people will start to build up, and anyone can start a node. So what I'm saying here isn't FUD. You can actually just see it happening and fire up your own node that plugs into the into Twitter's node and plugs into thousands of others. So you can be a bridge. And this is the hope that the network grows out and out. And the other day I paid for a book with Lightning, $25. And by the way, and it just went, it was like, blump, there it is, tick. No waiting, no nothing, pre-confirmed. Like, I've had this channel open for so long, so it's got so many confirmations. No one's double spending that. You know, it was just a bloop, there it is, and it's pre-confirmed by thousands and thousands of blocks. So really great technology. This is actually makes me more excited than any country accepting Bitcoin. I think Twitter jumping on the tip wagon. I think it's the old school. You know, there was it opens up a lot of stuff as well. As people start to see this, they get inspired. So Satoshi Pay is another great service that used to be on Bitcoin, and they invented some great stuff over here in Meinrad in Germany. He invented this fantastic tool where you could, instead of having a paywall for an article, which everyone hates because you have to pay for an article you haven't read yet. You pay for it, it lets you see it, and then first you have to sign up and put your credit card and all this nonsense. So that's a massive break. Then you finally see it and it's a crap article and you're like, oh, I wish I didn't read that. What he invented was a great way where it would show you the first 2 paragraphs, and then as you scroll down, it would flip every paragraph over, and the more you scroll down, it would keep flipping, and every flip from a gray box to the actual paragraph would release a few Satoshis from the wallet. And it was just a blah, 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 blah. And unfortunately, he had to use, he had to go off and use some other altcoin because Bitcoin's fees just got crazy. But now with the Lightning Network, I hope that this will inspire companies like his and others to be able to use Bitcoin again for that, because it is the safest network, and it is the original network. So, you know, let's see what happens. But yeah, super exciting news. I really can't wait to test it out.
I want to agree with what Josh said about the problems with Twitter being centralized, and that they might have to track these tips. They might have to censor or control these tips. The same problem came about at early PayPal. When PayPal was looking at what to do back in the day, before eBay, before all that stuff happened, they kind of wanted to make a currency like Bitcoin. And they understood right away that if you took that currency out of the PayPal wallet and you put it on your computer and you send it directly from your computer to someone else's computer, PayPal has no control over that transaction. The same thing is true for Twitter. What we're thinking of is something that would be fun for YouTubers or artists or people like us to raise money. That'd be great, right? But at the same time, as we talked about earlier, the bad people could also use it to raise money, and Twitter's a business. They could be held responsible if the bad people raise money on their service, use it to do bad things. Twitter is the middleman. So it's very interesting to see how they implement this, how they put some controls on this. And again, we need to know why they're putting these controls. They're putting these controls because they could be held responsible in the legal system for anything done badly